Hi everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this quiet place. This soft and gentle space we've made for you tonight. Tonight, we're going to spend some time together, exploring one of the most beautiful and mysterious things that exists in the known universe. And that thing is inside you, right now. It has been with you since the very beginning of your life. It has carried your earliest memories of sunlight and warmth, and the sound of voices you loved. It has held on to the smell of rain on warm pavement, the feeling of a favorite blanket, the quiet joy of a perfect afternoon. We're going to explore the science of memory. Memory is one of those things we rarely think about, even though we use it every single moment of every single day. It shapes who we are. It connects us to the people we love. It is the reason we can close our eyes and visit a place from long ago, as clearly as if we were standing there. There is so much gentle and beautiful science in the story of memory. Tonight, we will move through it slowly, softly, one quiet idea at a time. So let yourself settle in. Let your pillow feel comfortable. Let your eyes grow a little heavier. And let's begin together, very gently. Gently now. Let's take our first step into this soft and wonderful subject. Fact 1. The human brain contains somewhere around 86 billion neurons. That is a number so large, it is almost difficult to imagine. And we can take a moment to notice just how extraordinary that is. Each one of those neurons is a tiny living cell, humming quietly with electrical signals. And memory, the kind that holds your grandmother's voice, or the first song you ever loved, is not stored in any single one of those neurons. It is spread across vast, quiet networks of them, woven together like a very fine and delicate web. Scientists call these networks engrams. They are the physical shape of a memory, written in the living structure of the brain. Each time you remember something, a specific pattern of neurons lights up, softly and gently, like stars appearing, one by one, in an evening sky. That pattern is the memory itself, held there patiently for you, waiting to be visited again. Fact 2. Memory is not one single thing. Slowly, gently, researchers have discovered that the brain uses several different systems to store different kinds of memories. There is the memory for facts and events, the kind that tells you your own name, or what you had for breakfast last Tuesday. And then there is a completely separate system that stores skills and habits, like how to ride a bicycle, or how to write your name in cursive. These two systems are handled by entirely different parts of the brain. A person can lose one and keep the other almost perfectly intact. There is something quietly comforting in that, the idea that our minds are not fragile single things, but many gentle, overlapping systems, each one tending to a different part of who we are. Slowly, the brain builds its libraries, each one organized in its own quiet and careful way. Fact 3. One of the most important parts of the brain for memory is a small, curved structure called the hippocampus. Its name comes from the ancient Greek word for seahorse, because if you look at it from a certain angle, it does look a little like one, small and curved, and quietly elegant. The hippocampus sits deep inside the brain, one on each side, and its job is to take new experiences and gently transform them into lasting memories. Without it, new memories cannot be formed at all. A person whose hippocampus is damaged can still remember everything from before the injury, but nothing new will stick. They might meet someone, have a lovely conversation, and 5 minutes later, have no memory that the meeting ever happened. It is a strange and tender thing to consider. How much of our continuity, our sense of being the same person across time, depends on this one small, seahorse-shaped place. Fact 4. The process by which a new memory is made permanent in the brain is called memory consolidation, and it happens most beautifully while we sleep. During the day, our experiences are held in a kind of temporary storage in the hippocampus, fragile and new, like something still drying. Then, in the quiet hours of the night, while the body rests and the world grows still, the brain begins its slow and patient work. It replays the day's experiences, softly, almost like a gentle review, and slowly, gradually, those memories are transferred to the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, where they become more permanent, more stable, woven into the deeper fabric of who we are. Sleep is not just rest. It is the time when memory is carefully, lovingly tended. Fact 5. Short-term memory, the kind that holds a phone number just long enough for you to dial it, can only hold a small amount of information at once. Researchers in the 1950s discovered something quietly remarkable about this. The average person can hold about 7 items in short-term memory at any given moment, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but roughly 7. This is why phone numbers, in many countries, are 7 digits long. It is a gentle accommodation to the natural shape of the human mind. There is no need to rush. Just notice how the mind has its own natural rhythms and limits, and how the world has quietly arranged itself around them, without most of us ever noticing. 7 is a soft and human number, and it has been quietly woven into the fabric of everyday life. Now, as we continue, let's think a little more slowly about how memories actually form inside the brain. Fact 6. When you have an experience, when you hear a piece of music, or taste something sweet, or feel the warmth of sunlight, your neurons begin to communicate with each other. They do this by sending tiny chemical messengers across the small gaps between them, called synapses. When neurons fire together repeatedly, the connection between them grows stronger. Scientists have a gentle phrase for this: neurons that fire together, wired together. It was first described by a psychologist named Donald Hebb in 1949, and it remains one of the most beautiful and simple ideas in all of neuroscience. Every memory you have is, at its most basic level, a pattern of strengthened connections between neurons, a soft and intricate reshaping of the living brain, written there by your experiences, one quiet moment at a time. Fact 7. The brain is constantly changing in response to experience. This quality, the brain's ability to reshape and rewire itself, is called neuroplasticity, and it continues throughout a person's entire life, not just in childhood. Even now, as you rest here quietly, your brain retains the ability to grow new connections, to strengthen old ones, to gently reorganize itself in response to what you do and think and feel. This is a deeply comforting idea. It means that learning is always possible, that memory can always improve, that the brain is never fixed and finished, but always, quietly, in the process of becoming, gently moving forward, always gently, slowly, day by day. The brain tends to itself, reshaping and refining the landscape of who we are. Fact 8. There is a special kind of protein that plays a central role in making memories permanent. It is called CREB, which stands for a long and complicated name we don't need to worry about tonight. What matters is what CREB does. It acts like a kind of switch, turning on the genes that allow new synaptic connections to form and last. Without CREB, memories remain fragile. With it, they can be written into the structure of the brain for years or even decades. There is something almost poetic in this. that the permanence of memory, the fact that you can still remember the smell of your childhood home, or the sound of a voice you haven't heard in years, depends on a tiny protein that quietly flips a switch deep inside the cells of your brain. Memory is molecular. It is written in chemistry and light. Fact 9. Not all memories are created equally. Some memories stick instantly. A single experience can burn itself permanently into the mind. This tends to happen when strong emotion is involved. The emotional center of the brain, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, works closely with the hippocampus during memory formation. When something feels very significant, very joyful, or very frightening, the amygdala signals the hippocampus to pay extra attention, to hold on tightly to this moment. This is why we so often remember where we were during important events in our lives. The emotion acts like a gentle highlighter, marking certain memories for deeper storage. But tonight, we don't need to think about strong emotions. We can simply rest in the quiet knowledge that memory and feeling are gently, inseparably connected. Fact 10. Working memory is a fascinating and useful system. In the brain, it is different from short-term memory in that it doesn't just hold information, it holds and manipulates it. At the same time, when you do mental arithmetic, or follow a recipe, or hold one part of a sentence in mind, while you read the rest, that is working memory, doing its quiet, efficient work. It acts almost like a mental whiteboard, a temporary space, where information can be held, moved around, combined, and worked with. The prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain, just behind your forehead, is especially important for working memory, and there is no need to rush. You can simply appreciate how much is happening so quietly and automatically behind the calm surface of an ordinary moment. Let's take a quiet moment to think about the different kinds of memory the brain gently holds. Fact 11. Semantic memory is the memory for general knowledge, facts and meanings that are not tied to any particular personal experience. Knowing that Paris is the capital of France, or that water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, or that birds have feathers. These are all semantic memories. They exist in the brain, somewhat independently of the specific moment you learn them. Most people cannot remember the exact day they first learned what a chair is, or what the color blue looks like. That knowledge just settled quietly into place, accumulated gradually, over years of gentle exposure. Semantic memory is the vast, calm library of everything you know about the world, and it is enormous, far larger than we typically appreciate. It is there in the background, softly present, underpinning almost everything you think and say and understand. Fact 12. Episodic memory is the memory for personal events. The specific episodes of your own life, your first day at school, a birthday party from childhood, the last conversation you had with someone dear to you. These memories are different from semantic ones because they have a personal, story-like quality. They are located in time and place. They carry the flavor of a specific moment, a specific version of yourself. The brain's default mode network, a loosely connected set of brain regions that becomes active when we daydream or remember the past, is especially important for episodic memory. And interestingly, this same network is also active when we imagine the future. Memory and imagination use the same gentle machinery, and that is a beautiful and quietly astonishing thing to hold in mind. Fact 13. Procedural memory is the kind of memory stored in the body as much as the mind. It is the memory of how to do things, how to swim, how to type, how to button a shirt. Once a skill has been learned and practiced enough, it becomes automatic. It no longer requires conscious thought. A skilled pianist does not think about which finger goes where. The music flows from the hands like water. This type of memory is stored primarily in the cerebellum and the basal ganglia, deeper, older parts of the brain. Even people with severe amnesia, who cannot form new conscious memories, can still learn new physical skills. The hands can remember what the mind cannot. There is something quietly wonderful in that. The way the body carries its own kind of knowing, soft and deep, and patient. Fact 14. Priming is a form of implicit memory, the kind we are not consciously aware of. It works like this. If you have recently seen or heard a particular word or image, you are more likely to think of it again soon afterward, even if you don't remember the first encounter. The brain has been gently primed, like a pump, ready to flow in a certain direction. This happens entirely outside of conscious awareness. We are constantly being softly shaped by what we have recently encountered, and mostly, we have no idea. It is a reminder that the mind is far larger and more active than the small portion of it we can consciously observe. Most of what the brain does, it does quietly, in the background, without telling us, and we can take a moment to notice how vast and gentle that background really is. Fact 15. Autobiographical memory is the rich, personal story we carry of our own lives. It is a blend of episodic and semantic memory, specific events woven together with general knowledge about ourselves and our history. Psychologists have found that most people have very few clear autobiographical memories from before age 3 or 4. This is called childhood amnesia. The hippocampus is not fully mature at birth, and the brain systems for long-term memory take years to develop fully. The earliest memories we hold tend to be fragmentary, flashes of color, warmth, a face, a feeling, rather than full, coherent scenes. And yet, even those early fragments are precious. Slowly, gently, the brain begins its long and quiet work of recording a life, building the archive of a self, one soft experience at a time, gently moving forward into the quiet relationship between memory and sleep. Fact 16. Sleep is divided into several stages, and each one plays a different role in how the brain processes and stores memories. The two most important stages for memory are slow-wave sleep, the deepest, most restorative phase, and REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. During slow-wave sleep, the brain is particularly active in transferring memories from the hippocampus to longer-term storage. In the cortex, during REM sleep, the brain seems to be integrating and connecting new information with what is already known, finding patterns and meanings in the day's experiences. Both are essential. Both contribute to the gentle and patient process of memory consolidation. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, your own brain will begin this beautiful work, quietly tending to the memories of your day. Fact 17. Researchers have discovered that when people learn something new and then sleep on it, their performance improves measurably by the next morning, even if they haven't practiced at all. During that time, the brain, working quietly during sleep, has somehow refined and strengthened what was learned. This effect has been observed in studies of language learning, motor skills, and problem solving. There is a reason. The old advice, to sleep on a difficult decision, has persisted for so long. Sleep genuinely clarifies. It softens the edges of confusion and allows insight to settle quietly into place. The brain at rest is not idle. It is working carefully and patiently in its own deep and dreaming way, and there is no need to rush any of that. It happens on its own, beautifully, every night. Fact 18. Dreams are thought to be one of the ways the brain processes and integrates memories. During sleep, during REM sleep, the brain is highly active, almost as active as it is when awake, and yet the body is essentially paralyzed, held still by a gentle neurological mechanism that prevents us from acting out our dreams. During this time, memories are replayed, rearranged, and combined in new ways. Dreams often blend elements from recent experiences with older memories, creating those quietly surreal landscapes that feel so real in the moment of dreaming. Some researchers believe that dreaming helps the brain extract general patterns from specific experiences, the essence of what was learned, stripped of irrelevant details. Dreams are, in this soft and gentle view, the mind's way of doing its most creative and integrative work, quietly, while the body sleeps. Fact 19. There is a fascinating phenomenon called targeted memory reactivation, in which researchers play soft sounds during sleep that were previously associated with specific learning tasks. When a particular sound was played while a person learned something, and then that same sound was played softly during slow-wave sleep, memory for the associated information was significantly improved. The next morning, the sleeping brain, it turns out, can still hear and still respond in quiet, subtle ways. The sound gently nudges the brain to replay and strengthen the associated memory during consolidation. This is not a loud or dramatic process. It is delicate, soft, and entirely automatic. The brain is listening, even in sleep, tending to its memories with quiet and patient attention. Fact 20. One of the most remarkable things about sleep and memory is what happens during the first 90 minutes of sleep each night. The brain moves through a full cycle of sleep stages, from light sleep down into deep slow-wave sleep, and then back up into REM sleep. Each full cycle takes roughly 90 minutes. The early cycles of the night are dominated by slow-wave sleep, which is most important for consolidating factual and event-based memories. As the night progresses, cycles contain more and more REM sleep, which is important for emotional memories and procedural skills. So the entire night, from first falling asleep to waking in the morning, is a carefully orchestrated sequence of memory processes, each stage doing its own quiet and essential work. Sleep is not empty. It is full, in the gentlest possible way. Now, as we continue, let us think quietly about forgetting, which is not always a loss. Fact 21. Forgetting is not a failure of memory. It is, in many ways, an essential feature of it, a memory system that stored every single detail of every single moment would quickly become overwhelmed, cluttered with irrelevant information, unable to find what was actually needed. Forgetting is the brain's quiet editing process, a way of keeping the library organized, of clearing space for what is most important. The psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, working alone in Germany in the 1880s, was among the first to study forgetting scientifically. He memorized long lists of nonsense syllables and then tracked how quickly he forgot them. His results gave us the forgetting curve, a beautiful, smooth arc, showing how memory fades over time, most steeply in the first few hours, and then more gradually. That curve is still studied today, more than a century later. Fact 22. The forgetting curve, discovered by Ebbinghaus, showed that, without any reinforcement, we forget roughly half of new information within an hour of learning it. Within a day, we may retain only about a third. This might sound discouraging, but the other side of the forgetting curve is equally beautiful. It shows that reviewing information at spaced intervals dramatically slows the rate of forgetting. Each review resets the curve, and the curve, after each reset, becomes flatter, the forgetting slower. This is the scientific foundation of what educators call spaced repetition, reviewing information at gradually increasing intervals to move it into long-term memory. The brain responds to repetition the way a path responds to walking. The more it is traveled, the clearer and more permanent it becomes. Slowly, gently, repetition builds a road. Fact 23. Transience is the term psychologists use for the gradual fading of memories over time. Not all memories fade at the same rate. Emotionally significant memories tend to persist longer. Frequently accessed memories are refreshed and strengthened with each recall, and memories that are distinctive, unusual, surprising, or personally meaningful are better retained than ordinary ones. The brain is selective about what it holds onto, and its selections are not random. They follow a soft logic of usefulness and significance, keeping what seems most likely to matter in the future and gently releasing what is not. There is something peaceful in this. The idea that the mind is always quietly making room, always tending to itself, always choosing, with some deep and wordless wisdom, what is worth carrying forward. Fact 24. Absent-mindedness is a different kind of memory failure. Not a failure of storage, but of attention. When we are distracted or not fully present during an experience, the brain does not encode it deeply, and so it is later difficult to recall. We cannot remember where we put our keys because we were not really attending. When we put them down, the memory was never properly formed. This is why mindfulness, the practice of gently bringing attention to the present moment, has been found to improve memory, not because it changes the brain's storage mechanisms, but simply because it encourages the encoding process to happen fully, carefully, without distraction. Attention is the first step of memory. Before anything can be remembered, it must first be noticed, and we can take a moment to notice just this, just now, just quietly. Fact 25. Misattribution is a gentle kind of memory error in which we remember something correctly, but attribute it to the wrong source. You might remember a particular idea, but mistakenly believe you came up with it yourself, when in fact, you heard it somewhere else. Or you might recognize a face, but be unable to remember where you know the person from. The feeling of familiarity is functioning correctly. The face does feel known, but the contextual details of the original encounter have been quietly lost. This happens because familiarity and recollection are actually two separate memory processes in the brain, handled by different regions. One can work, while the other does not. Memory is not a single stream, but many parallel, quiet rivers, each one flowing on its own course through the landscape of the mind. Let's take a quiet moment to think about what it actually feels like to remember something. Fact 26. When you retrieve a memory, you are not playing back a recording. Memory does not work like a video camera. Each time you remember something, the brain actively reconstructs it, pulling together stored fragments from different brain regions and assembling them into something that feels whole and continuous. The visual details might be stored in one place, the emotional tone in another, the sounds in yet another, the hippocampus coordinates. This reassembly, drawing the threads together, but reconstruction means that small changes can creep in. Each act of remembering is also subtly an act of editing. The memory that exists after recall is very slightly different from the one that existed before it. Memory is always, in the quietest possible way, in the process of being rewritten. Fact 27. Elizabeth Loftus is one of the most important researchers in the study of memory, and her work has shown, gently and clearly, how malleable our memories really are. In her famous studies, she found that simply asking a question in a slightly different way could change what people remembered about an event. If people were asked how fast two cars were going when they smashed into each other, they tended to remember higher speeds and more damage than if the word hit was used instead. The language of a question can quietly reshape the memory it is asking about. This is not a sign of weakness or dishonesty. It is simply how memory works. It is reconstructive, flexible, gently responsive to context. Memory is not a stone. It is more like water, taking on the shape of its container. Fact 28. Context plays a powerful and gentle role in memory retrieval. We tend to remember things more easily when we are in the same situation, the same place, the same mood, the same physical state, as when we first formed the memory. This is called context-dependent memory. There are famous studies in which divers who learned a list of words underwater later recalled those words better when they were back underwater, and less well when they were on land. The environment itself becomes part of the memory, woven quietly into the fabric of what was stored. This is why returning to a childhood home can stir up memories that seemed entirely forgotten. The context acts like a key, quietly turning in a lock that had not been opened for years. Slowly, gently, the surroundings whisper to the memory, and the memory wakes. Fact 29. State-dependent memory is closely related. It refers to the way our internal state at the time of learning influences later recall. Information learned in a particular mood or under particular physical conditions tends to be best recalled when in a similar state. This effect has been observed for mood as well as for more physical states. It is one of the reasons why studying in a calm, rested state tends to produce better memory than studying while stressed or exhausted. The brain is always encoding not just the content of an experience, but the entire context of that experience, including the state of the body and mind. At the time, we carry our internal weather inside our memories, quietly and permanently, as part of the texture of what we know. Fact 30. The tip of the tongue phenomenon is one of the most universally recognized experiences of memory. It is the feeling of knowing something, being absolutely certain that you know a word, a name, a fact, but being unable to retrieve it. The information is there, somewhere, just out of reach. Research has found that in this state, people can often correctly identify the first letter of the word, or the number of syllables, or words that sound similar to it. The memory is partially accessible, like a shape seen through frosted glass. The tip of the tongue state happens more often with age, and more often for names than for other kinds of words. There is no need to rush. When it happens, simply wait and let the mind work quietly. Very often, the word comes eventually, drifting up from somewhere soft and deep, gently moving forward into some of the more unusual and beautiful corners of memory science. Fact 31. Flashbulb memories are vivid, detailed memories of the moment when we learned about a highly significant and surprising event. People who lived through certain major historical moments often describe their memory of hearing the news as extraordinarily clear and detailed. They can describe exactly where they were, what they were doing, who was with them, what the weather was like. For a long time, researchers believed these memories were uniquely accurate, photographically precise, preserved perfectly by the emotional intensity of the moment. Later research has shown they are not necessarily more accurate than ordinary memories, but they do feel more vivid and confident. The brain marks certain moments as profoundly important, and the memory of them carries a special quality of vividness, even when some of the details have quietly shifted over time. Fact 32. Eidetic memory, sometimes called photographic memory in popular culture, is the ability to recall images, sounds, or objects with extraordinary precision and detail after a brief exposure. True eidetic memory is actually quite rare, and the popular idea of a photographic memory that works like a perfect camera is largely a myth. What does exist are people with very strong visual memory who can hold a mental image in mind with unusual clarity for a short period. This is more common in young children than adults. Some researchers believe it may diminish as the brain develops more sophisticated, language-based memory systems, which are in some ways more efficient. The brain is always finding new ways to be clever about storage, always quietly reorganizing its resources in the most useful possible way. Fact 33. Savant syndrome is a rare condition in which a person has an extraordinary and almost inexplicable ability in a narrow area, often music, mathematics, art, or memory, alongside other cognitive or developmental challenges. Some savants can recall vast amounts of information with effortless precision. A savant named Kim Peek, who inspired the film Rain Man, could read a book in about an hour and retain nearly everything in it, having memorized over 9,000 books. By the end of his life, he could read 2 pages simultaneously, one with each eye. Researchers believe his unusual abilities were connected to an atypical brain structure, specifically the absence of the corpus callosum, the large bundle of fibers connecting the 2 brain hemispheres. His brain had found its own quiet and remarkable way of being. Fact 34. The method of loci is one of the oldest known memory techniques, dating back to ancient Greece. It involves imagining a familiar place, a house, a street, a garden, and mentally placing pieces of information in different locations along a familiar route. Through that place, to recall the information, you mentally walk the route, and each location reminds you of what was placed there. This technique works because the brain's spatial memory systems are remarkably powerful. We evolved to navigate and remember physical environments, and these systems can be harnessed to hold information of all kinds. Memory champions who compete in memorizing vast sequences of numbers or cards. Almost universally, use this technique. There is something quietly beautiful about it, the way memory and space are so deeply, gently entwined in the architecture of the brain. Fact 35. Muscle memory, the kind involved in physical skills like riding a bicycle, swimming, or playing a musical instrument, is not actually stored in the muscles. The muscles themselves have no memory. The memory lives in the brain and nervous system, particularly in the cerebellum and basal ganglia. But it feels as though it lives in the hands, the body, the bones, because the brain's motor programs run so automatically and fluidly that they seem to bypass conscious thought entirely. Once learned and practiced enough, physical skills can persist for remarkably long periods. Without practice, people who have not ridden a bicycle in decades often find, when they try again, that the skill returns with surprising ease. The body carries its knowing patiently for years, just waiting to be asked again. Now, as we continue, let us think softly about the chemistry that makes memory possible. Fact 36. Acetylcholine is one of the most important neurotransmitters, chemical messengers, in the brain, involved in memory and learning. It is particularly important in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, the two brain regions most closely associated with new memory formation and working memory during active learning and wakefulness. Acetylcholine levels in the brain are high, making synaptic connections more plastic and responsive during deep, slow-wave sleep. Acetylcholine levels drop, which is thought to facilitate the process of memory consolidation, allowing new memories to be stabilized without interference from new incoming information. The brain is always managing its own chemistry with quiet and remarkable precision, adjusting its internal environment to support exactly the kind of processing it needs to do at any given moment. Fact 37. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most often associated with pleasure and reward, also plays a quiet and important role in memory. When something interesting, surprising, or rewarding happens, dopamine is released, and this release acts as a signal to the brain. This is worth remembering. Dopamine enhances synaptic plasticity. It makes it easier for new connections to form and strengthen in response to the experience. This is one of the reasons why learning something in a context of curiosity and interest tends to produce better memory than learning under pressure or boredom. The brain is not neutral about what it stores. It has preferences shaped by chemistry that lean toward what is meaningful, rewarding, or new. And we can take a moment to notice how beautifully the brain rewards its own curiosity. Fact 38. Cortisol is a hormone associated with stress, and its relationship with memory is complicated and subtle. Moderate levels of cortisol, such as those produced by mild, manageable stress, can actually enhance memory formation. They signal the brain that something important is happening and should be well remembered. But high, prolonged levels of cortisol, the kind produced by chronic stress, can damage the hippocampus over time, actually shrinking its volume and impairing the ability to form new memories. This is one of the clearest pieces of evidence that long-term stress is genuinely harmful to the brain. The good news is equally clear. Rest, safety, and calm tend to support memory. The brain, given peace, tends to flourish. And tonight, in this soft and quiet space, you are giving your brain exactly what it needs. Fact 39. Glutamate is the brain's most abundant, excitatory neurotransmitter, and it plays a central role in a process called long-term potentiation, which is widely considered the cellular mechanism underlying memory formation. When neurons fire together, repeatedly and strongly, a specific type of glutamate receptor, called the NMDA receptor, opens and allows a flood of signals to pass through, triggering a cascade of changes that permanently strengthen the synapse. Long-term potentiation was first described in 1966 by a Norwegian researcher named Tarja Lomo, working quietly in a laboratory in Oslo. His discovery transformed our understanding of how the brain learns. Every memory you have ever formed has, at its most fundamental level, involved a quiet flood of glutamate through the synapses of your brain. Fact 40. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, has been found to enhance the formation and recall of social memories, memories of people, relationships, and social experiences. It is released during moments of connection and closeness, and it seems to make those moments more memorable, more vivid, more strongly stored. This may be one of the reasons why our memories of people we love tend to be particularly clear and enduring, not just because of emotional significance, but because of the chemistry of bonding itself. The brain seems to treat social memories as especially worth keeping. The face of someone who matters to you is written more deeply into your neural architecture than the face of a stranger. Love and memory are, in their quiet chemistry, deeply and tenderly intertwined. Let's take a quiet moment to think about how memory changes as we move through life. Fact 41. Memory development begins before birth. Research using fetal heart rate monitors has shown that unborn babies can learn and remember simple patterns of sound. If a particular piece of music is played repeatedly during the late stages of pregnancy, newborns later respond to that music with recognition. Their heart rate changes in a distinctive way, as if something familiar has been encountered. The very first memories, then, are laid down in the warmth and darkness before life has even properly begun. Memory starts quietly, long before we are aware of having it, in the fluid and gentle world. Before waking, the first sounds we ever remember are muffled and warm and safe, and we carry them, unknowingly, long into our lives. Fact 42. Infantile amnesia, the inability to recall events from the first 2 to 3 years of life, has puzzled scientists and philosophers for a long time. The brain of a very young child is growing and changing so rapidly that the neural circuits necessary for long-term declarative memory have not yet been fully established. The hippocampus is still developing. The prefrontal cortex, which is important for self-referential memory, will not be fully mature for another 2 decades. But this does not mean that early experiences leave no mark. They shape the brain's development, the emotional responses, the sense of security or uncertainty in the world. Early memories, even those that cannot be consciously recalled, are written into the brain in deeper and more subtle ways, in patterns of response and feeling that persist long after the explicit events have gently faded away. Fact 43. Childhood and adolescence are a time of remarkable memory development. Between the ages of roughly 3 and 12, children become increasingly capable of forming and retaining detailed autobiographical memories. Language plays a significant role in this. The development of language provides a new framework for organizing and storing experiences, a way of giving events a beginning, a middle, and an end. Children who are encouraged to talk about their experiences with caregivers, to narrate what happened, to describe what they felt, tend to develop richer and more detailed autobiographical memories. The act of talking about a memory is also, in a quiet way, an act of strengthening it. Stories are a kind of memory technology, one of the oldest and gentlest the human mind has ever developed. Fact 44. In early and middle adulthood, memory tends to function at its peak efficiency. For most people, working memory is at its strongest. The ability to learn new information and form lasting memories is robust and reliable. But even at peak function, the brain is selective. It remembers what it pays attention to, what it finds meaningful, what it processes deeply. Shallow processing leads to shallow memory. Deep, engaged, thoughtful processing leads to deep and lasting memory. This is one of the most consistently replicated findings in memory research. Depth of processing matters more than the number of repetitions. A single, deeply engaged encounter with an idea can produce a stronger memory than many shallow, distracted ones, and there is no need to rush through ideas. The slow and gentle turning of an idea in the mind is exactly what makes it stay. Fact 45. As people move into their 50s, 60s, and beyond, certain aspects of memory naturally begin to change. Processing speed slows slightly. Working memory becomes a little less efficient. The retrieval of specific names, dates, and proper nouns, already the most vulnerable category of memory in younger adults, becomes somewhat more effortful. But not all memory changes with age. Semantic memory, general knowledge, remains remarkably stable, even improving, in some respects, as the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime continues to grow. Procedural memory, how to do things, shows very little decline. And emotional memory, the ability to remember the emotional content and meaning of experiences, is often preserved well into old age. Memory changes, but it does not simply fade. It shifts, softly and gradually, into a different shape, gently moving forward into the brain regions that tend this quiet garden of memory. Fact 46. The prefrontal cortex, the large region of the brain, located just behind the forehead, is involved in many aspects of memory, including working memory, the organization of memories, and the deliberate effort to recall things. It is also important for source memory, remembering not just what happened, but where, and when, and how it was learned. The prefrontal cortex is one of the last parts of the brain to fully mature, reaching adult-level development only in the mid-20s, and it is one of the first regions to show age-related changes. Later in life, it sits at the very front of the brain, as if presiding over everything behind it, quietly organizing, directing, keeping track. It is the brain's patient librarian, always knowing where things are kept. Fact 47. The amygdala, those two small, almond-shaped clusters of neurons, one on each side of the brain, are best known for processing emotions, particularly fear. But their role in memory is profound and quiet. The amygdala enhances memory consolidation for emotionally significant events, signaling to the hippocampus and to the brain's memory systems. This matters. Hold on to this carefully. The stronger the emotional response to an event, the stronger the memory for it tends to be. This is why traumatic events can leave such vivid and intrusive memories. The amygdala has been profoundly activated, but for more ordinary, gentle emotional experiences, a beautiful sunset, a kind word, a moment of quiet joy, the amygdala's influence is softer, adding a gentle warmth and vividness to memories that make them more likely to last. Fact 48. The cerebellum, a deeply wrinkled structure at the back and base of the brain, whose name means little brain in Latin, is essential for procedural and motor memories. It coordinates the precise timing and sequencing of movements, allowing skilled physical actions to become smooth and automatic. With practice, the cerebellum contains more neurons than any other single brain structure. Roughly half of all the neurons in the brain are concentrated in this one small region. It processes information with remarkable speed and precision, operating largely outside of conscious awareness. When a musician's fingers find the right notes without conscious direction, or when a dancer moves through a complex sequence without thinking about each step, the cerebellum is doing its quiet, essential, beautifully precise work. Fact 49. The thalamus is a small, egg-shaped structure deep in the center of the brain that acts as a relay station, receiving signals from the senses and directing them to the appropriate regions of the cortex for processing. It is also involved in memory, particularly in the consolidation of new memories during sleep. Certain types of amnesia are associated with damage to specific parts of the thalamus because the thalamus is so central to the brain's information processing architecture. Disruptions there can cascade outward, affecting many different cognitive functions at once. In a quiet way, the thalamus is like the brain's central post office, receiving, sorting, and directing everything that arrives, keeping the flow of information moving smoothly and steadily through the vast network of the mind. Fact 50. The entorhinal cortex is a region of the brain that acts as the major gateway between the hippocampus and the rest of the cortex. Sensory information from all over the brain converges on the entorhinal cortex before being passed on to the hippocampus for memory processing. And when memories are being retrieved, the hippocampus sends information back through the entorhinal cortex, where it is distributed to the relevant cortical areas for conscious experience. The entorhinal cortex also contains specialized neurons called grid cells, which create a kind of internal map of space, part of the brain's navigational system. Navigation and memory share deep roots in the brain's architecture, reminding us that long before we needed to remember facts or faces, we needed to remember the paths that led us home. Now, as we continue, let us think softly about the way memory shapes who we are. Fact 51. Memory is the foundation of personal identity, the continuous thread of remembered experience, the sense that the person who woke up this morning is the same person who went to sleep last night, the same person who was a child, the same person who has loved and lost and wondered and grown. This continuity is built entirely from memory. Without memory, identity would dissolve into a series of disconnected present moments, each one isolated from what came before. Philosophers have long wrestled with this question. If memory is the foundation of identity, what happens to a person whose memory is severely impaired? What does it mean to be a self without the thread of remembered experience to hold you together? These are gentle and profound questions with no sharp answers, only the quiet wonder of asking them. Fact 52. The narrative self, the story we tell about who we are, is built from autobiographical memory. We are, in a deep sense, the stories we tell about ourselves, and those stories are not fixed or final. They are being quietly revised and reinterpreted all the time in the light of new experiences, new understandings, new ways of looking at what is past. Research has shown that the way people narrate their own life stories, whether they tend toward coherent, meaning-making narratives or fragmented, disconnected ones, is related to their psychological well-being. The brain's capacity to find meaning in memory, to weave events into a story that makes sense, is one of the quietest and most powerful things it does. We are all, in our own gentle way, the authors of ourselves. Fact 53. Cultural memory is a fascinating extension of individual memory. The way communities and societies preserve and transmit memories across generations through stories, rituals, monuments, music, and traditions. Groups carry shared memories of their past, creating a collective identity that extends far beyond any individual life. Before writing was invented, oral traditions were the primary technology of cultural memory. Specially trained individuals in many societies took on the role of memory keeper, reciting long genealogies, histories, and stories from memory, sometimes preserving accounts that stretched back hundreds of years. The human capacity for language and storytelling evolved, at least in part, as a memory technology, a way of extending the reach of the mind far beyond the boundaries of a single brain, a single lifetime. Fact 54. Nostalgia, the warm, bittersweet feeling of longing for the past, is intimately connected to memory. Neuroscientists studying nostalgia have found that it activates many of the brain's reward circuits, producing a genuinely pleasant emotional state, even when the memories involved are tinged with sadness or loss. Nostalgia seems to serve several important psychological functions. It reinforces a sense of personal continuity, the feeling of being connected to one's past self. It reinforces social connections. Nostalgic memories almost always involve other people, and it provides a sense of meaning, a feeling that one's life has a coherent shape and a story. Nostalgia is the memory system's way of offering comfort, of softly reminding us that we have been somewhere warm before, and that warmth is not entirely gone. Fact 55. The phenomenon of collective false memories, in which large numbers of people share a memory of something that never actually happened, is a quietly astonishing feature of human cognition. The Mandela effect, as it has come to be called, refers to cases where many people confidently share false memories of the same event. These collective misrememberings likely arise from the same reconstructive processes that produce individual false memories, schema-based reasoning, social reinforcement, and the tendency of the brain to fill in gaps with plausible information when many people are exposed to the same misinformation and when the social environment confirms and reinforces a particular version of events. A shared false memory can form and persist with surprising tenacity. Memory is social, as well as individual, and the social world shapes what we remember in quiet and pervasive ways. Let's take a quiet moment to think about some of the most remarkable instances of human memory. Fact 56. Hyperthymesia, or highly superior autobiographical memory, is an extremely rare condition in which individuals can recall virtually every day of their lives in extraordinary detail. People with this condition can be given any date in their life after a certain age and will immediately recall with remarkable precision what day of the week it was, what the weather was like, what they were doing, what significant events happened in the world that day. As of the time most research was conducted, fewer than 100 people had been formally identified with this condition. Far from being experienced as purely joyful, many people with hyperthymesia report that it can be exhausting. The inability to forget, the constant presence of the past. It is a reminder that forgetting is not only natural, but gentle and necessary. Fact 57. Memory champions, people who compete in events requiring the memorization of thousands of pieces of information, have been studied extensively by neuroscientists, and one of the most surprising findings is that the top performers typically do not have exceptional baseline memory. Before training, they perform only ordinarily on standard memory tests. What they have is a mastery of technique, particularly the method of loci and other spatial encoding strategies. Brain imaging studies have shown that during memorization, memory champions activate spatial navigation regions of the brain, the same regions used to navigate physical environments, far more strongly than untrained participants. Their secret is not a better memory, but a more creative use of the memory system they already have. Anyone can learn these techniques. The capacity for remarkable memory is, in its own quiet way, already there. Fact 58. The World Memory Championships, first held in London in 1991, include events for memorizing binary digits, decks of playing cards, and strings of random numbers. The world record for memorizing a shuffled deck of cards currently stands at under 20 seconds, a feat that would have seemed impossible before the systematic development of modern memory techniques. But perhaps more interesting than the records themselves is what the championship reveals about the nature of memory, that with the right techniques and enough practice, the brain can accomplish things that seem, from the outside, quite extraordinary. Memory is trainable, expandable, and far more flexible than we typically assume. It has room for more than we usually ask of it, waiting patiently for us to simply ask a little more. Fact 59. Some animals have memories that are in certain ways more impressive than human memory. Clark's nutcrackers, small birds related to crows and jays, can store up to 30,000 individual seeds across thousands of different hiding places over the course of a season, and then retrieve the vast majority of them months later, even after snowfall has covered the landscape. The hippocampus of these birds is proportionally much larger than that of related species that do not store food. This is a beautiful example of brain plasticity, shaped by ecological need. The brain growing to meet the demands placed on it by the environment. Memory is not a luxury for a small bird facing a cold winter. It is the difference between life and death. Memory is ancient and deeply necessary and quietly magnificent. Fact 60. Octopuses have been shown to have impressive long-term memories despite having a very different brain structure from vertebrates. Their neurons are distributed throughout their arms, as well as in a central brain, giving them a kind of distributed intelligence, unlike anything seen in other animals. They can remember the solution to a puzzle they solved weeks before. They can recognize individual humans who interact with them regularly, and they seem to carry preferences and dislikes. The octopus is a reminder that memory, and perhaps even something like personality, can arise from very different physical architectures. There is more than one way for the universe to build a mind, and all of those ways, in their own gentle fashion, are remarkable, gently moving forward into the gentle, quiet relationship between memory and the act of learning. Fact 61. The testing effect, also called retrieval practice, is one of the most robust findings in memory research. It shows that actively retrieving information from memory is far more effective for long-term retention than simply rereading or restudying the same information. Each time you successfully recall something, the memory trace for it is strengthened more than if you had passively reviewed it again. This seems counterintuitive. Surely reading something more times would help more than trying to remember it. But the brain treats retrieval as a kind of exercise, and like all exercise, it makes the underlying system stronger. The struggle of trying to remember, even when the answer feels just out of reach, is itself a form of learning. The brain is built to find effort meaningful. Fact 62. Interleave practice. Mixing up different types of problems or topics during study, rather than focusing on one thing at a time, has been shown to produce better long-term retention, even though it feels harder and less efficient in the moment. Block practice, where you work through all examples of one type before moving on, feels more fluent and productive, but the brain actually learns more deeply when it has to continually determine which type of problem it is facing and which strategy to apply. The slight difficulty, the gentle confusion of mixing topics, forces deeper processing. This is a soft but important lesson. The feeling of learning easily is not always a sign that learning is happening deeply. Sometimes, the gentle struggle is where the real work is being done. Fact 63. Elaborative interrogation is a memory technique that involves asking yourself why something is true as you are learning it. Instead of simply reading a fact and moving on, you pause and gently ask, why would this be the case? What does this connect to? What else do I know that relates to this? This kind of deep, generative questioning forces the brain to create meaningful connections between new information and existing knowledge, building a richer web of associations that makes the new information much easier to retrieve later. Memory loves connections. It is at its deepest level a system for finding and building meaning, for weaving new experiences into the vast, existing fabric of what is already known. Every new connection is a new thread in that fabric, and the fabric is a new connection. The brain is built to find effort meaningful. Fact 63. Interleave practice. Mixing up different types of problems or topics during study, rather than focusing on one thing at a time, has been shown to produce better long-term retention. Even though it feels harder and less efficient in the moment, block practice, where you work through all examples of one type before moving on, feels more fluent and productive, but the brain actually learns more deeply when it has to continually determine which type of problem it is facing and which strategy to apply. The slight difficulty, the gentle confusion of mixing topics, forces deeper processing. This is a soft but important lesson. The feeling of learning easily is not always a sign that learning is happening deeply. Sometimes, the gentle struggle is where the real work is being done. Fact 64. grows richer and warmer with every one. Fact 64. The generation effect is a memory phenomenon in which information that you generate yourself, even partially, is better remembered than information you passively read. If you try to complete a word before being shown the answer, you will remember the word better than if you simply read it. This is why filling in blanks, answering questions, and actively completing information tends to produce better memory than passive reading. The brain gives priority to self-generated content. It is as though information you have made an effort to produce feels more owned, more personally meaningful, more worth storing carefully. There is a quiet dignity in effort. The mind tends to honor what was gently, patiently worked for. Fact 65. The spacing effect. The finding that spreading learning out over time produces better retention than massing it altogether was discovered by Ebbinghaus in the 1880s and has been replicated so many thousands of times since that it is considered one of the most reliable phenomena in all of cognitive psychology. Yet despite this, most students intuitively prefer to study in large, concentrated sessions rather than shorter, spaced ones. The spaced sessions feel less efficient, even though they produce dramatically better results. Part of the explanation is that spaced practice forces the brain to do more retrieval work. It has to reach further back for the information each time, and that gentle reaching is the work of memory. Slow and spread out, the brain learns best. There is no need to rush. Patience is, in the most literal and scientific sense, one of the best tools the mind has. Now, as we continue, let's think gently about what happens when memory is altered or disrupted. Fact 66. Amnesia, the loss of memory, takes several different forms, and understanding them has revealed a great deal about how memory works. In the healthy brain, retrograde amnesia refers to the loss of memories from before a brain injury, while anterograde amnesia refers to the inability to form new memories after an injury. A person with anterograde amnesia can still remember everything from their past life, but each new experience slips away like water. The most studied case in the history of neuroscience was a patient known for decades only as H.M. Henry Molaison, who had surgery in 1953 that removed large portions of his hippocampus. He lost the ability to form new long-term memories almost entirely. He was kind, patient, and good-humored, and he contributed more to our understanding of memory than almost any other individual in history, simply by being himself, quietly, for 50 years. Fact 67. Henry Molaison, H.M., could still learn new motor skills. After surgery, he could practice a drawing task and improve at it over time, even though he had no memory of having practiced. Each session, he would look at his improving performance with surprise and quiet wonder. His procedural memory system was intact. Only his declarative, conscious memory was lost. This dissociation, skill without recollection, ability without awareness, was one of the clearest demonstrations in neuroscience that memory is not one unified system, but several parallel ones, each relatively independent of the others. H.M. could draw, he could learn, he could care for himself, recognize familiar people, enjoy music and humor, his identity, his personality, his warm and gentle presence. All of that remained, even after so much had been lost. Fact 68. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia and produces a gradual, progressive loss of memory and cognitive function. It is characterized by the buildup of two types of protein abnormalities in the brain, plaques of a protein called amyloid beta, which form between neurons and disrupt their communication, and tangles of a protein called tau, which form inside neurons and damage their internal structure. The hippocampus and entorhinal cortex are typically the first regions to be significantly affected, which is why short-term and recent memories tend to be lost before older, long-established ones. In the later stages of Alzheimer's, long-term memories also fade, but in the earlier stages, people may still clearly remember events from decades ago while struggling to remember what happened this morning. The distant past, paradoxically, can seem closer than the recent one. Fact 69. Post-traumatic stress involves a different kind of memory disturbance, not the loss of memory, but an excess of it. Intrusive, involuntary memories of traumatic events can resurface with great vividness and intensity, sometimes as if the event were happening again in the present moment. Researchers believe this occurs partly because traumatic memories are formed under conditions of extreme stress and amygdala activation, making them particularly vivid and strongly encoded, but also fragmentary and poorly organized, lacking the coherent narrative structure of ordinary memories. Much of the work of trauma treatment involves helping the brain process and contextualize these memories, giving them a proper place in the past, gently reducing their power over the present. It is slow and patient work, done with great care, but the brain can heal. Fact 70. False memories are memories of events that never actually happened. They can be subtle, a small detail remembered incorrectly, or they can be dramatic and detailed recollections of events that simply did not occur. Research by Elizabeth Loftus and others has shown that false memories can be implanted quite reliably in experimental settings simply by suggesting that an event occurred, providing a plausible context and encouraging the participant to imagine it. Many participants eventually develop detailed, confident memories of the fabricated event. This is not a reflection of poor memory or gullibility. It happens to people with excellent memories. It is simply a consequence of the reconstructive, imaginative nature of memory. Memory is creative, and creation sometimes produces things that were not originally there. Slowly, gently, the mind fills in its own blanks. Let's take a quiet moment to think about the way our senses are woven into the fabric of memory. Fact 71. The sense of smell has a uniquely powerful connection to memory and emotion. This is because the olfactory bulb, the part of the brain that processes smell, connects directly to the hippocampus and amygdala without first passing through the thalamus, as other sensory information does. This direct connection means that smells can trigger vivid emotional memories with unusual immediacy and force. A particular scent can transport you in an instant to a specific place, a specific moment, a specific feeling from long ago. This phenomenon is sometimes called the Proustian memory effect. named after the French author Marcel Proust, who beautifully described the way a taste of a small cake dipped in tea could suddenly, completely, bring back the world of his childhood. Smell is the most ancient sense, and it keeps the oldest memories. Fact 72. Music has an extraordinary ability to evoke memories, and this connection has a clear neurological basis. Music activates a very wide network of brain regions, including those involved in emotion, movement, and memory. Familiar music activates the medial prefrontal cortex, a region associated with autobiographical memory, even when other aspects of memory are severely impaired. This is the reason why people with advanced Alzheimer's disease, who may no longer recognize family members or remember their own names, can often still respond to and sing along with familiar music from their youth. Music is stored in the brain in a particularly deep and resilient way. It is as though music has a special key to the oldest and most protected rooms in the house of memory, rooms that remain unlocked long after many others have gently closed. Fact 73. The visual system contributes enormously to memory. The brain dedicates a very large proportion of its cortex, roughly 30%, to visual processing. Visual memories are rich and detailed, encoded with color, shape, spatial location, and movement. The process of mentally visualizing information, creating a vivid mental image, is one of the most effective ways to enhance memory. Memory techniques, like the method of loci, rely heavily on vivid visual imagery. The more sensory detail an image contains, the more strongly it tends to be encoded. This is why making a mental picture of something you want to remember, exaggerating its features, placing it in an unusual or vivid setting, is so effective. The brain's visual memory system is ancient, powerful, and generous. It will hold a great deal if only we give it something vivid enough to see. Fact 74. The tactile sense, the sense of touch, is closely linked to emotional and procedural memory. The feeling of holding something familiar, of touching a surface with a particular texture, can trigger surprisingly vivid memories. Infants and young children store a great deal of their early experience in tactile and bodily memory. The feeling of being held, of warmth and pressure and softness, before language or visual memory are fully developed. These early tactile memories may persist as an emotional residue, even when their specific content cannot be consciously recalled. Touch is one of the first languages the brain learns, and the memory for it runs deep and quiet, like an underground river, flowing steadily beneath the surface of more conscious recollection. We remember with our hands, our skin, our bodies, in ways we rarely name or notice. Fact 75. Taste memory is closely related to smell memory and shares the same ancient neural pathways. Flavors can trigger memories with a directness and emotional force that is almost startling. A particular taste can call up not just the memory of a specific meal, but the whole emotional atmosphere of the occasion, the people who were there, the quality of the light, the feeling of the day. Conditioned taste aversion, in which a single experience of becoming sick after eating a particular food leads to a lasting, strong aversion to that food, is one of the most powerful and rapidly formed memories known It can form after just a single pairing, without any conscious decision-making, and can persist for years. The brain takes food safety very seriously indeed, and it writes that lesson in ink, gently moving forward into the beautiful way memory appears throughout the natural world. Fact 76. Salmon return to the exact stream where they were born in order to spawn. After spending years in the open ocean, they navigate using a combination of the Earth's magnetic field, celestial cues, and most remarkably, the precise chemical signature of their birth stream, which they memorize as juveniles and can still detect. Years later, they follow an olfactory memory, a memory of smell, back across thousands of miles of open water to a specific place in a specific river. There is something quietly moving about this. The idea of a creature carrying in its small brain and its ancient body the memory of a home it has not visited in years, trusting that memory across vast and difficult distances. Memory in the salmon is literally the thread that leads home. Fact 77. Elephants are famous for their memory, and the science supports the legend. Elephants can recognize individual humans and other elephants they have not seen for decades. They remember the locations of water sources across vast ranges of territory, knowledge that is essential for survival during droughts. They have been observed returning to the bones of deceased family members and gently investigating them in behavior that researchers have cautiously interpreted as a form of recognition or mourning. The matriarch of an elephant herd carries in her memory a vast store of ecological and social knowledge built up over decades that is essential for the survival of the entire group. When a matriarch is lost to poaching or old age, the group loses not just a leader, but a living library, a repository of irreplaceable wisdom, quietly accumulated over a long and attentive life. Fact 78. Migratory birds navigate across thousands of miles using a combination of the sun, the stars, the Earth's magnetic field, and landmarks, and all of this navigation depends on memory. Young birds, on their first migration, learn the route and then remember it for subsequent years. Some species navigate back to the same small territory, the same few acres, year after year, across migrations spanning hemispheres. The Arctic tern, which migrates from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back each year, a round trip of roughly 70,000 kilometers, does so with a precision that still astonishes researchers. In the body of a bird weighing less than 100 grams, there is a map and a compass and a memory of the turning world, all held together, quietly guiding that small and determined creature home. Fact 79. Honeybees have spatial memories that allow them to navigate complex environments, remember the locations of flower patches, and communicate that information to other bees through their famous waggle dance. A bee can remember a productive flower source for several days and navigate back to it efficiently using the position of the sun, adjusting for the passage of time. Even when the sun is not visible, bees also demonstrate a form of social learning. They can watch another bee's dance and then fly directly to the described location, translating a spatial memory encoded in movement. back into a real-world navigation, in a brain containing fewer than 1 million neurons, compared to the human brain's 86 billion. The honeybee achieves remarkable feats of memory and navigation. Small brains can hold great maps. Fact 80. Plants do not have neurons or brains, but certain plants display behavior that functions like a form of memory. The mimosa plant, when its leaves are touched, folds them inward as a defensive response. But if it is dropped repeatedly from a small height, an action that initially triggers the same folding response, it gradually stops responding, as if it has learned that the drop is harmless. This habituation, a simple form of learning, persists for weeks. There is no nervous system carrying the memory. Researchers believe it is stored in the plant's cells through some chemical or structural change that has not yet been fully understood. Life, in its broad and extraordinary variety, has found many quiet ways to remember, many ways to carry forward the lessons of experience far beyond the boundaries of any brain. Now, as we continue, let us return softly to the quiet world of sleep and what it does for memory. Fact 81. The glymphatic system is a recently discovered waste clearance system in the brain that is especially active during sleep. During waking hours, cellular waste products accumulate in the spaces between brain cells. During sleep, the glymphatic system flushes these spaces with cerebrospinal fluid, washing away accumulated waste, including the amyloid beta proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. This discovery, published in 2013, provided a new and compelling explanation for why sleep is so essential to brain health. Sleep is literally a time when the brain cleans itself. It is not passive or empty. It is the brain's maintenance window. When waste is cleared, connections are strengthened, and memories are quietly consolidated. To sleep well is to give the brain the time it needs to tend to itself with care. Fact 82. Sleep spindles are brief bursts of electrical activity that occur during stage 2 of sleep, the light sleep stage that precedes deeper, slow-wave sleep. They appear on EEG recordings as small, rhythmic waves spinning up and down like a miniature electrical storm. Researchers have found that the density of sleep spindles, how many occur during a night of sleep, is correlated with next-day memory performance. More spindles, better memory. Sleep spindles seem to play a direct role in the process of memory consolidation, facilitating the transfer of memories from the hippocampus to the cortex. The brain produces hundreds of sleep spindles over the course of a single night, each one a brief, quiet pulse of consolidating work, tending to the day's memories, like a patient and careful gardener tending a very large and gentle garden. Fact 83. Slow oscillations, large, slow waves of electrical activity that occur during deep, slow-wave sleep, coordinate the activity of the hippocampus and cortex during memory consolidation. The hippocampus generates sharp-wave ripples, brief, intense bursts of activity that are nested within the slow oscillation cycles and coordinated with sleep spindles. This triple coordination, slow oscillations, spindles, and sharp-wave ripples, is thought to represent the mechanism by which memories are transferred from hippocampal to cortical storage. It is an intricate and beautiful choreography conducted entirely in the sleeping brain. In the deep quiet of the night, the sleeping brain is not still. It is dancing very gently with the memories of the day. Fact 84. Napping is one of the most well-supported interventions for memory. Studies have consistently shown that a short nap of 20 to 90 minutes after learning new information significantly improves later recall compared to staying awake. A 90-minute nap that includes a full sleep cycle, incorporating both slow wave and REM sleep, produces the greatest benefit. Even a 20-minute nap, which mostly consists of light sleep and some stage 2 sleep, produces measurable memory enhancement. Many cultures throughout history have practiced a midday rest, and the science of memory suggests there is genuine wisdom in this habit. The brain is not designed for long, unbroken periods of wakefulness. It benefits from periodic rest, just as muscles benefit from rest between periods of use. Gentle, natural, and deeply restorative. Fact 85. REM sleep, the stage in which most dreaming occurs, is particularly important for emotional memory processing and for creative problem solving. During REM sleep, the norepinephrine system, associated with stress and vigilance, is turned almost entirely off, while other neurotransmitter systems remain active. Some researchers believe this creates a unique neurochemical environment in which emotional memories can be reprocessed and integrated without the full emotional charge of the original experience. This may be one of the reasons why sleep often reduces the intensity of emotional reactions to difficult events. The phrase, "sleeping on it," captures something genuinely true about the way sleep helps us process and come to terms with difficult feelings. The night softens what the day has made sharp. Let's take a quiet moment to think about the gentle, evidence-based ways memory can be supported and nourished. Fact 86. Physical exercise is one of the most powerful tools for supporting memory and brain health, and its effects are remarkably well documented. Aerobic exercise, the kind that raises the heart rate, has been shown to increase the volume of the hippocampus, promote the birth of new neurons in that structure, and improve memory performance on standardized tests. The mechanism seems to involve a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is sometimes described as fertilizer for the brain. Exercise increases BDNF, and BDNF promotes the growth and survival of neurons. Even a single session of moderate aerobic exercise has been found to produce measurable improvements in memory that persist for hours afterward. The body and the brain are not separate systems. The health of one is deeply, quietly, the health of the other. Fact 87. Adequate, high-quality sleep is perhaps the single most important thing most people can do to support their memory. The evidence for this is enormous and consistent. Sleep deprivation, even modest sleep restriction, over several nights, significantly impairs the ability to form and consolidate new memories. Pulling an all-night study session before an exam may cram information into short-term memory, but without sleep, much of it will not consolidate into long-term storage. The students who sleep after learning remember more than those who stay awake. This is not a minor effect. It is large and reliable and consistent across many studies. Sleep is not the enemy of productivity. It is among its deepest foundations. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you are doing something genuinely, scientifically, good for your brain. Fact 88. Meditation and mindfulness practice have been found to support memory through several pathways. Meditation increases attention and reduces mind wandering, which improves the encoding of new memories. Long-term meditation practice has been associated with structural changes in the brain, including increased thickness in regions of the prefrontal cortex associated with working memory. Some forms of meditation also reduce cortisol levels, which protects the hippocampus from the damaging effects of chronic stress. Regular meditators tend to show better performance on tests of working memory and attention than non-meditators of similar age and background. The quiet, gentle act of sitting still and attending to the breath is, among many other things, a gentle and patient act of tending to memory. Fact 89. Social engagement has been consistently found to support cognitive health and memory throughout the lifespan. Regular social interaction exercises the brain's social cognitive systems, the ability to understand other people's perspectives, to follow conversations, to track and remember social information. And these systems overlap significantly with the more general cognitive systems involved in memory. Older adults who remain socially active tend to maintain their memory function better than those who are more isolated. Loneliness, conversely, has been identified as a significant risk factor for cognitive decline. Human beings are deeply social animals, and the brain's health is, in a quiet but profound way, a social thing. We think and remember and flourish best in connection with others. Fact 90. A diet rich in certain nutrients supports brain health and memory. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fish, walnuts, flaxseed, and other sources are essential components of neuronal membranes and are important for synaptic function. Antioxidant-rich foods, berries, leafy greens, and many other fruits and vegetables protect neurons from oxidative damage. The Mediterranean diet, which is high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, and olive oil, has been repeatedly associated with better cognitive aging and lower risk of dementia. Chronic excess of sugar and saturated fats, conversely, has been associated with impaired memory function and reduced hippocampal plasticity. The brain is made from what we eat, maintained by what we consume, shaped day by day by the quiet, cumulative effects of everything we nourish ourselves with. Gently moving forward into the beautiful way, memory connects past, present, and future. Fact 91. The brain's default mode network, the set of regions most active during rest and mind wandering, is involved in three seemingly very different mental activities: remembering the past, imagining the future, and understanding other people's perspectives. The fact that the same network underlies all three suggests they may share a common cognitive process: the mental simulation of events real or imagined. Memory, in this view, is not merely a record of the past. It is the raw material from which we construct our sense of the future, our understanding of others, and our orientation in time. The past and the future are both built from memory, and memory is always pointing gently in both directions at once, back into what has been and forward into what might be. Fact 92. Perspective memory. The memory for future intentions, for things we plan to do, is a separate and fascinating system within the broader architecture of memory. Remembering to take medication, to call a friend, to bring something to work. These are perspective memory tasks. Unlike retrospective memory, which is about the past, perspective memory is about the future. It requires not only encoding an intention, but holding it in a kind of suspended background readiness until the right moment arrives to act on it. The brain monitors the environment for cues that trigger the intention, even while attending to other things. Perspective memory tends to decline with age more than some other memory systems. Writing things down, setting reminders, and creating environmental cues are all gentle and effective ways to support it. Fact 93. The perceived passage of time is intimately connected to memory. Time seems to pass more quickly when we are busy, engaged, and not forming many distinct new memories. A week of familiar routine with few novel experiences may feel, in retrospect, like it passed in a moment because the brain has relatively few distinct memory traces to use as landmarks when reconstructing the period. Conversely, a week of new experiences, travel, new people, unusual events may feel much longer in retrospect because so many distinct memories were formed that the period seems richly populated with time. This is one of the reasons why novelty and new experience can make life feel, in retrospect, longer and richer. Memory is not just a record of time. It is, in a quiet and profound sense, the substance of experience time itself. Fact 94. The reminiscence bump is a well-documented phenomenon in which adults tend to have disproportionately vivid and numerous memories from the period of roughly ages 15 to 30, when older adults are asked to recall memories from across their lives. Memories from this period are recalled more readily and in greater detail than memories from other periods, even controlling for recency effects. Several explanations have been proposed. This period is one of great novelty and self-construction, many first experiences, much identity formation. It is also a time when many of the most significant personal memories are formed. First loves, first independent decisions, formative friendships, and experiences. The brain, it seems, keeps the period of becoming with particular care, as if recognizing that those years were the foundation of the person who came after. Fact 95. Memory plays a central role in imagination and creativity. Creative thought is, at its core, the recombination of existing memories and ideas in new ways. The novelist draws on memories of people, places, and feelings. The scientist draws on memories of existing knowledge and observed phenomena, recombining them to form new hypotheses. The composer draws on memories of musical patterns and emotional associations, weaving them into something new. Creativity does not arise from nowhere. It arises from the vast, richly connected network of everything. The mind is stored. The richer and more diverse the memory, the more raw material is available for creative recombination. Memory is not just the past, it is the garden where the future is quietly, patiently grown. Now, as we continue, slowly, gently, let us think about some of the final, beautiful ideas in the science of memory. Fact 96. The capacity of human long-term memory is extraordinarily large, far larger than most people intuitively appreciate. Researchers have estimated that the human brain can store something in the range of 2.5 petabytes of information. That is roughly 2.5 million gigabytes. Unlike computer storage, which is finite and fixed, the brain's storage capacity seems to expand as connections between neurons multiply and deepen. The more you know, the more easily you can learn and remember new things, because new information can attach itself to the vast web of existing connections. Memory does not fill up. It grows. It expands. It deepens. There is no ceiling to what the brain can hold, only the gentle limits of time and attention and the quiet, endless accumulation of a single, lived, and remembered life. Fact 97. The brain does not distinguish very sharply between a vividly imagined event and a real one. Brain imaging studies have shown that imagining an action activates many of the same neural circuits as actually performing it. Imagining a place activates the same spatial memory networks as physically navigating it. This is the neural basis for the effectiveness of mental rehearsal. In athletes and musicians, imagining a performance activates the same motor and perceptual circuits as the real performance, reinforcing the same neural pathways. It also has implications for memory. A vividly imagined event can over time begin to feel like a memory of something real. The brain is a storytelling organ, and stories told vividly enough can become indistinguishable from memories of experience. The imagination and the past share their materials gently and inseparably. Fact 98. Language and memory are deeply intertwined. Having a word for something makes it easier to remember. Languages with specific words for nuanced concepts allow their speakers to encode and remember those nuances more easily than speakers of languages without those words. Conversely, memories that are difficult to put into words, complex emotional states, aesthetic experiences, certain kinds of physical sensation tend to be harder to consciously access and describe, even when they are clearly present in some form. The development of language in children greatly enhances their memory capacity, providing a new and powerful encoding system for experience. Language is not just a way of communicating memory, it is, in a very real sense, one of the primary tools by which memory is made and kept. Fact 99. Memory is not equally distributed across the brain, but neither is it entirely localized. The connectome, the complete map of all neural connections in the brain is almost unimaginably complex. There are roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections in the human brain, and memory is distributed across this vast network in patterns that we are only beginning to understand. Different types of memory use different structures, but they all depend on the integrity and connectivity of the larger network. Memory is not in any one place. It is in the relationships between places, in the patterns of connection, the weights of synaptic strength, the topology of a living network that has been shaped over a lifetime by everything it has ever experienced. Memory is the brain's autobiography, written in the language of connection itself. Fact 100. The act of remembering changes the memory that is remembered. Each time a memory is retrieved, it briefly becomes unstable, a state called memory reconsolidation. During this window of instability, the memory can be subtly modified before being restored. This means that memories are not fixed. The moment they are formed, they continue to change throughout their lives, shaped by each successive retrieval, by the context in which they are remembered, by the mood and knowledge and perspective of the person remembering. A memory from childhood, recalled in middle age, is shaped by everything that has happened since. It is not the same memory that was stored 40 years ago. It has been gently, quietly, inevitably changed by the passage of all those years of living. Memory is not an archive. It is a living thing, still growing, still changing, still becoming, gently moving forward, only a little further, now softly, slowly. Fact 101. Memories can be transferred between individual neurons during reconsolidation, according to some fascinating and very recent research. Scientists studying the sea slug Aplysia, a simple organism whose large neurons make it ideal for neuroscience research, found that they could apparently transfer a conditioned memory from one sea slug to another by injecting RNA extracted from the trained animal into an untrained one. The recipient showed behavioral changes consistent with the memory. This research is preliminary, and its implications are not yet fully understood, but it hints at possibilities in the biology of memory that are quietly extraordinary. That memory may be encoded not only in synaptic connections, but in the molecular material of the cell itself. Memory goes deeper than we know into the chemistry of life. Fact 102. The placebo effect, in which a treatment with no active ingredient nonetheless produces genuine physiological change, is, in a meaningful sense, a memory phenomenon. It involves the brain retrieving and applying its memory of past experiences with similar treatments. The expectation of relief, shaped by memory, produces genuine relief. The brain's predictions based on memory are powerful enough to alter the body's chemistry. This is a beautiful example of how memory is not merely a passive record, but an active generative force, shaping perception, shaping experience, shaping the body's response to the world. What we remember about the past quietly sculpts what we experience in the present, in ways far more pervasive and profound than we typically recognize. Fact 103. Implicit memory biases our perceptions and decisions in ways we are rarely consciously aware of. The mere exposure effect, the finding that we tend to prefer things we have been exposed to before, even without conscious recognition, is a form of implicit memory influencing preference. Unconsciously remembered faces, words, melodies, and images are all processed with more fluency than unfamiliar ones, and that increased fluency is experienced as liking or familiarity. We are constantly, quietly guided by a vast store of implicit knowledge and preference accumulated over a lifetime of experience. Most of what we know, we don't know we know. The mind is full of quiet knowing, running gently beneath the surface of all conscious thought. Fact 104. The brain creates a sense of time and memory through the careful marking of events with temporal context. Episodic memories are stored not just as what happened, but as when and where, with a rough sense of their position in the timeline of one's life. This temporal organization of memory is thought to involve the hippocampus, which seems to function as a kind of temporal indexing system, tagging memories with information about when they occurred relative to other events. Without this temporal tagging, memories would exist as a kind of eternal, unordered present, without the sense of before and after that gives a life its shape and narrative. The hippocampus is, among its many roles, the keeper of time, the quiet archivist who knows not just what was stored, but in what sequence, in what order, in what chapter of a life. Fact 105. The default mode network, when active during rest and mind wandering, is often replaying and integrating recent memories. Far from being idle when we are not actively engaged, the brain uses moments of quiet rest to process and organize the experiences of the day. This spontaneous memory replay may be one of the reasons why taking breaks during learning, including moments of simple, unfocused rest, tends to improve subsequent memory. The rest is not wasted time. It is processing time. The brain, given a quiet moment, turns inward and tends to what it has gathered, gently placing each piece in its proper context. Every moment of stillness is a gift to the memory system, an opportunity for the mind to do its quiet and important work. Fact 106. Forgetting, as we noted earlier, is not always loss. There is a form of beneficial forgetting called directed forgetting, in which the brain can actively suppress certain memories when given instruction to do so. In experimental settings, people who are told to forget certain items after learning them do indeed remember them less well. More remarkably, brain imaging shows active suppression, the prefrontal cortex inhibiting the hippocampus and reducing the neural activity associated with the to-be-forgotten memory. This suggests that forgetting is not always passive decay, but can be an active, effortful process. The brain has a degree of control over its own memory, a quiet ability to turn the volume down on certain stored experiences, to soften what needs to be softened, to release what is ready to be released. Fact 107. Memory is not only in the head. The gut, sometimes called the second brain, contains a vast network of neurons that communicate directly with the brain via the vagus nerve. The gut has been found to store and transmit emotional information that influences mood, cognition, and memory. The microbiome, the community of microorganisms living in the gut, also communicates with the brain and has been found in animal studies to influence memory and learning. This gut-brain axis is a new and rapidly developing field of research, and many of its details are still being worked out. But it points to a beautiful and expanding picture of what memory is, not a function confined to the brain, but a property of the whole, interconnected, living system of the self. Fact 108. The immune system and memory share a remarkable structural parallel. Just as the brain learns from experience through synaptic plasticity, the immune system learns from exposure to pathogens through the development of memory cells, B cells and T cells, that remember a specific pathogen and can mount a faster, stronger response the next time it is encountered. Vaccination works by training this immune memory. The concept of memory, of storing information from past experience to guide future responses, appears not just in the brain, but as a fundamental organizing principle of biological systems. Life, at many levels, solves the problem of the future by remembering the past. Memory is not a luxury of complex nervous systems. It is a deep and ancient strategy of survival. Fact 109. Collective cultural memory. The shared stories, myths, and histories that communities carry across generations is now being studied through the lens of neuroscience and cognitive psychology. The brain's tendency to impose narrative structure on experience, to organize events into stories with causes and consequences and meanings, is a universal human trait that shapes the kinds of memories that are preserved and transmitted culturally. Stories that follow certain narrative structures, particularly those involving struggle, transformation, and resolution, are more easily remembered and passed on. This may explain the universality of certain story structures across cultures and throughout history. The human brain evolved to remember stories, and the stories that have survived are, in part, shaped by that fact. We carry our cultural memories in the architecture of the stories we tell and love. Fact 110. Memory consolidation continues for far longer than was once believed. Initial consolidation, the stabilization of a new memory, happens over the first few hours and days after learning. But systems consolidation, the gradual shift of memories from hippocampus-dependent to cortex-dependent storage, continues for months or even years. Very old memories stored years or decades ago are more widely distributed in the cortex and are less dependent on the hippocampus for retrieval. This is why hippocampal damage tends to produce amnesia that is more severe for recent events than for very old ones. The old memories have already made their slow migration to the cortex, where they are safely stored in a distributed and resilient form. Time and sleep and quiet living gradually transform fresh memories into something deep and permanent. Slowly, gently, we are approaching the end of our time together. The pacing softens here, just a little more. Fact 111. Memory for places, spatial memory, is ancient and deep, shared with many other species. The discovery of place cells in the hippocampus by researchers John O'Keefe, Maybrit Moser, and Edvard Moser, who shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2014, revealed that specific neurons fire when an animal is in a particular location in space. These place cells create an internal map of the environment. Grid cells in the entorhinal cortex provide a coordinate system for this map, like the lines of latitude and longitude on a globe. Together, these cells create what researchers call a cognitive map, an internal representation of the spatial world. Memory and navigation share the same neural machinery. To know where you are is, in a very literal sense, a form of memory. The brain always knows somewhere quietly the shape of where it has been. Fact 112. The act of writing things down, journaling, making notes, recording memories, externalizes memory in ways that both aid recall and, interestingly, sometimes reduce it. Writing things down reduces the need to hold them in memory, which can free cognitive resources. But it also means the information is less deeply processed and encoded in biological memory. This is sometimes called the generation effect in reverse. Outsourcing memory to paper reduces the retrieval practice that would strengthen the biological memory. Neither approach is better in all circumstances. External memory tools are invaluable for practical purposes. Internal, biological memory is what carries our sense of self and continuity. We use both always in a quiet and natural partnership between the brain and the gentle tools it reaches for. Fact 113. Music that was heard during a particular period of life, especially adolescence and early adulthood, tends to be remembered with unusual vividness and emotional richness throughout the rest of life. This is sometimes called the musical reminiscence bump, parallel to the autobiographical reminiscence bump for events. The brain's reward circuitry is particularly sensitive during adolescence, and music heard during this sensitive period seems to become more deeply encoded in the reward and memory systems. This is why a song from your teenage years can transport you almost instantly back to a specific feeling, a specific version of yourself, a specific afternoon from decades ago. Music is a time machine, gentle and immediate, built from the brain's own architecture of memory and feeling. Fact 114. Reading activates a rich network of brain regions. Language areas, visual areas, emotional areas, motor areas. And the memories formed during reading can be surprisingly vivid and emotionally resonant. Good literature creates what psychologists call situation models, rich mental simulations of the places, people, and events described. These simulations activate the same perceptual and motor circuits as real experience, and the memories formed can feel, in some respects, as real as memories of actual events. This is why fictional characters can feel like real people, why imagined places can feel like visited ones, why a book read long ago can leave memories as vivid as memories of lived experience. The brain does not sharply distinguish between lived and imagined. Both are processed as experience, and both leave their quiet marks. Fact 115. Color enhances memory. Information presented in color tends to be better remembered than the same information presented in black and white. This effect is thought to occur because color adds an additional feature that helps distinguish one item from another in memory, a distinctive quality that the brain can use as a retrieval cue. Emotional colors, reds, oranges, bright yellows, tend to capture attention more strongly, further enhancing encoding. This is one of the reasons why highlighting, color coding, and visual organization of information can be helpful for memory. The brain, built over millions of years in a vivid and colorful world, is well equipped to use color as a memory tool. The world's richness of color is, among many other things, a gift to the memory system. Fact 116. The smell of old books, that soft, sweet, slightly vanilla and almond scent, comes from the breakdown of the paper itself over time. The organic compounds in the paper release aromatic molecules as they age. But for many people who love books, this smell is deeply bound up with the memory of libraries, of quiet afternoons reading, of the particular pleasure of holding something old and full of knowledge. The smell has become a memory cue, a key to a whole landscape of associated feelings and experiences. This is the olfactory memory system, doing exactly what it was built to do, binding a sensory cue to a rich web of associated memory. Smell is the language of the past, and we carry its vocabulary quietly in our bodies all our lives. Fact 117. Sleep talking. Somniloquy occurs when the brain partially activates speech systems during sleep, producing fragments of speech that may reflect the memory consolidation processes happening during that sleep. The content of sleep talking is often related to recent events and emotional concerns, the very material being processed and consolidated during sleep. Sleepwalking is similarly thought to arise from partial activation of motor systems during deep sleep. These phenomena remind us that the sleeping brain is not entirely quiet or still. It is active in many quiet, deep ways, some of which briefly surface as observable behavior. The sleeping body is a window, slightly ajar, into the busy and gentle work being done within. Fact 118. The neuroscientist Suzanne Corkin spent 47 years studying Henry Molaison, HM, the patient with severe amnesia, who contributed so enormously to our understanding of memory. She wrote a book about him near the end of her life, describing not only his neuroscience, but his humanity, his warmth, his humor, his patience, his enduring capacity for kindness, even as his memory slipped away each day. He lived to the age of 82, always in the present moment, unable to build a future from a past he could not hold. He never knew how famous he had become, or how much his willing participation in research had changed the world. He was always simply himself, present, kind, and unaware of his own extraordinary legacy. There is something deeply tender in that. Fact 119. Childhood memories, though fewer and less detailed than adult ones, carry a particular quality of vividness and emotional richness. The earliest memories people report, the fragmentary, sensory-rich impressions from the first years of life, are often tinged with a quality of pure, undifferentiated experience. Warmth, light, color, sound, the feeling of being held, before the narrative frameworks of language and social expectation have fully formed. Experience is simply itself, unmediated, immediate, bright. Something of that quality persists in the few memories that survive from those early years, like small, glowing fragments of amber, holding within them the texture of a self just beginning to be. The earliest memories are the most fragile and the most luminous. They are the first seeds of a story that is still, even now, continuing to grow. Fact 120. And finally, there is this. Every memory you have ever formed, every experience you have ever stored, every face and voice and smell and moment that has settled quietly into the vast and living network of your brain is yours. It belongs to no one else. It has been shaped by your specific path through the world, your particular loves and losses, and moments of quiet wonder. It is as unique as you are. And right now, in this moment, even as you rest and your mind begins to drift towards sleep, your brain is tending to those memories, consolidating the day, strengthening the connections, filing away what is worth keeping, and gently releasing what is not. The sleeping brain is a patient and loving keeper of all that you have lived. And tomorrow, when you wake, those memories will be waiting, softly, quietly, faithfully, exactly where they have always been. Slowly now, gently, we are almost at the end of our time together. And what a journey it has been through the quiet hallways of the mind, through the beautiful and intricate science of how we remember, how we store and shape and slowly refine the long, quiet story of who we are. We have traveled through the hippocampus and its seahorse shape, through the millions of gentle synapses strengthening in the night, through the forgetting curve and the smell of old books, through the salmon finding its way home, and the bee dancing its map in the air, and the small bird crossing hemispheres by the light of remembered stars. We have thought about sleep and its patient, nightly kindness to the brain. We have rested in the quiet fact that memory is not a stone, but water, always flowing, always taking new shapes, always in the softest possible way becoming. And we can take a moment to notice, right now, how still everything feels, how quiet the room is, how heavy and warm your body has become. There is nothing you need to remember right now, nothing you need to hold on to. Your brain already knows what to keep. It is already quietly and beautifully doing exactly what it was built to do. All you need to do is let go, slowly, gently. Let your breathing slow down just a little more. Let your thoughts grow softer and further away, like sounds heard from a great and comfortable distance. The science of memory is, at its deepest level, the science of who we are. And who we are is something safe and held and gently, permanently in process. You are safe, you are held, and you are already softly and beautifully on your way to sleep. If you found this video peaceful and helpful, a gentle like and a quiet subscription would mean the world. But for now, there is truly nothing to do but rest. Good night. Sleep softly. Goodbye.